I remember the day I realized my marriage was unraveling as vividly as if it were yesterday. I, Jennifer, stood in the middle of our kitchen, a place once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now tainted by secrets and lies. My husband Kevin and I had seemed like the perfect mismatch to everyone around us. Me, a 36-year-old pharmacist, grounded and content in my quiet life, and Kevin, a vibrant 26-year-old who brought unexpected joy and chaos into my world. Our relationship, which blossomed at the pharmacy where I worked, was something out of a fairy tale. I was the reserved pharmacist who had never found time for love, content with the company of elderly customers and the occasional cat. Then, Kevin walked in, ostensibly to pick up a prescription, but what he really did was sweep me off my feet. We married within the year, our whirlwind romance the talk of both our families and the small town we lived in. But today, as I stood facing him, his expression unreadable, the dream was collapsing. I get it, we're serious about this, so let's go for a divorce, shall we? Are you okay with that? Kevin's words cut through the tense air. His detachment stung, his readiness a sharp contrast to the commitment we once vowed. Yes, thank you. It's great timing for a divorce, I replied, my voice steady though my heart was anything but. I could hardly believe these words were coming out of my mouth. It felt surreal, discussing our separation so nonchalantly as if we were planning a weekend getaway. But perhaps it was for the best. At least now, I could go on my planned trip next week without the charade of sneaking around, pretending everything was fine. Now I can go on next week's trip without sneaking around. What a trip! Today's the perfect timing for a trip with both the pregnancy and the divorce confirmed, Kevin continued, his words feeling like daggers. I winced at the mention of the pregnancy, a reality I was still grappling with. It was going to be hard moving around with a big belly, indeed. That's why we decided to go on a trip before my condition became too apparent. Earlier, I had almost lied to Kevin about having a business trip next week, a convenient cover for my need to escape and think. Now, with the divorce looming, there was no need for pretense. After Kevin's revelation of his affair, nothing could surprise me anymore. Or so I thought. His blatant discussion of their plans, in front of me, as if I were just a spectator to their betrayal, was bewildering. The sheer audacity of him and his mistress planning their trip, discussing it openly, left me reeling. But I had to focus on what came next. I had left our home shortly after discovering the affair, taking refuge in a nearby hotel to gather my thoughts. It was there, amidst the sterile solitude of a hotel room, that I received an envelope addressed to me. Inside, a filled-out divorce form. Kevin wanted to end things quickly, evidently. The audacity of delivering it during their trip was mocking, yes, but it gave me the upper hand. Got it. I'll file for divorce. I'll also move up the stuff tomorrow, so don't worry, I declared, resolute. Despite the pain, I was determined to handle this divorce with dignity and show Kevin and his mistress that their disrespectful behavior towards marriage and its vows was unacceptable. As I stood there, a newlywed yet soon to be divorced, I wondered how I had come to this point. My marriage, once a miracle, was now a lesson in heartache. But I was resolved to move forward, to find strength in my solitude, and to rebuild, no matter what the future held. As I returned to the pharmacy counter, clutching the patches and my hastily scribbled contact details, my heart raced with an unusual mix of excitement and apprehension. When I first met Kevin, my then 24-year-old future husband, he was just another customer, a handsome one, at that, coming in to pick up some patches after a traffic accident. In our small-town pharmacy, a visit from someone like him was a rare treat. My colleagues and I would quietly revel in the excitement, but, being the reserved and somewhat older single woman among them, I never considered myself a contender for his attention. Kevin's initial visits were unremarkable, focused solely on the transaction at hand. We exchanged only necessary words as I handed him his medication. He was polite, always thanking me with a smile that seemed to brighten the whole room. I admired him, sure, like one would admire a distant movie star, never expecting anything more. However, his continued visits for treatment meant I saw him more frequently. By his third visit, I assumed it would likely be the last. The treatment for his injuries must be nearing an end, and with that, the end of our brief, incidental interactions. As I prepared his prescription this final time, I noticed the post-it note. It was an odd addition. We rarely saw personal messages attached to prescriptions. Curious, I peeled off the note and studied it, my confusion growing. It looked like an ID for a messaging app. Why is there a contact note on the prescription? I muttered to myself, baffled. Concerned I was missing something, I turned to my colleagues, who were also busy at their stations. Is this a directive from the hospital asking to be contacted? I asked them, hoping for some clarity. Their reactions were unexpected. There was a brief moment of silence, followed by a sudden burst of laughter. One of them, chuckling, accused me of bragging, as if I had somehow orchestrated this interaction. Another, more exasperated than amused, dramatically tossed a pen and paper at me, urging me to jot down my own contact details. Only then did it dawn on me that the note was Kevin's subtle attempt to extend our connection beyond the professional realm. Feeling a mixture of flustered and flattered, I quickly wrote down my contact information. My hands trembled slightly as I did so, the reality of the situation settling in. This wasn't just a transactional interaction anymore, it was potentially the start of something personal. I hurried back to the counter where Kevin waited. Sorry for the delay, here's your medication for this time, I said, trying to sound as composed as possible, despite the butterflies in my stomach. Thank you, he replied, his smile as warm as ever. He took the medication and our fingers brushed briefly, sending a small jolt through me. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back, giving me a nod and a knowing glance that suggested he was looking forward to more than just another pharmacy visit. Walking back to my station, my mind raced with possibilities. This unexpected turn of events was both thrilling and daunting. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would lead us down a path filled with both immense joy and profound challenges. As I handed over the plaster that day, my heart was pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Slipping my contact details into the packaging felt like a small act of rebellion against my usual reserved nature. That evening, as I sat alone at my dining table, staring at the dark screen of my smartphone, a wave of doubt washed over me. Should I reach out first? What if he didn't respond? The thought of initiating contact was daunting, and I found myself inventing reasons to delay. Suddenly, my phone buzzed to life, startling me from my reverie. It was him, Kevin. The message was simple, an invitation to dinner. My heart leapt. Of course, I accepted. There was no real reason to refuse, in fact, it felt like the universe was nudging me forward. As we began dating, the connection between us grew stronger and more profound. After 2 years, during a quiet dinner, curiosity got the better of me and I asked Kevin why he had initially given his contact details to someone he believed was much younger. His response was as straightforward as it was endearing. I thought you were in your 20s until our first dinner date. I asked what he thought when he discovered my actual age. He shrugged. I was surprised you were older, but that's it. If I like someone, age doesn't really matter, right? His casual acceptance of our age difference was refreshing and made me feel secure. Despite resolving my worries about our age gap, there was still the matter of our upcoming wedding and the financial implications of starting a new life together. With my steady income as a pharmacist and his earnings from sales, there was a significant gap. I pondered whether to propose covering more of our expenses, considering my larger savings and higher salary. The thought of discussing money felt awkward, and I hesitated to bring it up, fearing it might make Kevin uncomfortable or emasculated. One evening, as we discussed wedding plans, I tentatively suggested splitting the costs 50-50, adding that I was willing to contribute more if needed. Kevin quickly reassured me, insisting that he wanted to contribute equally and was planning to work hard to ensure our future together. His response alleviated my fears, and any concerns about our financial dynamics dissipated. His attitude towards our marriage, as a partnership of equals, deeply impressed me. By the time we married, I had no doubts left. Our wedding was a joyful celebration, surrounded by colleagues, friends, and family who showered us with envy and congratulations. I felt genuinely happy, secure in the knowledge that we were starting our life together on such solid ground. However, as is often the case, the blissful beginning of our married life gradually gave way to unexpected challenges. The initial period of adjustment, filled with love and excitement, began to evolve as we faced new realities and pressures that tested our bond in ways neither of us had anticipated. The honeymoon phase of our marriage was idyllic in every way. Those first 3 months were filled with shared laughter, spontaneous outings, and mutual respect that made every day feel like a continuation of our wedding day. Kevin would rush home after work, eager to spend the evening with me. Weekends were sacred, reserved for exploring new places hand in hand, creating memories just for the two of us. He even took on household chores with a cheerful spirit, making everything seem effortless. Despite the joy, there lingered a subtle undercurrent of worry on my part about starting a family, given my age, but I chose to sideline those concerns, determined to relish our current bliss. However, as we neared the 3-month mark, subtle cracks began to surface in our once perfect facade. The first sign was Kevin's changing routine. "Are you coming home late again today?" I asked him one evening, trying to mask the concern in my voice. "Yeah, it will be the usual time, I guess," he replied nonchalantly, not realizing the impact of his words. "Don't you think you've been coming home too late lately? Sometimes you even miss the last train and have to take a taxi," I pointed out, my worry growing. "What, you're complaining even though I'm working hard?" Kevin's response was sharp, his tone defensive. He was clearly upset by my words, and in his frustration, he slammed the front door as he left, causing a loud bang that echoed through our home. The force knocked over a picture frame on the entrance shelf, a symbol of our happier times now lying face down. I sighed, gently setting the picture frame upright again. I knew he was working hard, and I didn't want to be selfish, but his dismissive attitude stung. I couldn't shake the feeling that more than his schedule was changing, his entire demeanor towards me seemed different, colder. "Hey, isn't today the day for burning trash, and isn't it your turn to take it out?" I asked him another day, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, my bad. I'll make sure to do it next time," he replied casually, not moving from his spot on the sofa where he was engrossed in his smartphone. "You said that last time and still forgot, right?" I pressed, feeling the frustration build. "It's not a big deal to leave the trash in the house for 2 or 3 days, is it?" His dismissive reply only fueled my irritation. "Of course, it's not okay. Leaving burning trash for 3 days is unthinkable. Stop nagging. If you have a problem, why don't you do it all yourself?" His words were sharp, and with that, he retreated to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Before our marriage, we had agreed to share household chores equally. Kevin had even set various rules himself, promising cooperation and teamwork. Yet, just 3 months in, those promises were dissolving, and I found myself taking on more and more of the household responsibilities. Today, I would be taking out the trash alone. While I was prepared to handle more of the housework initially, the real problem was much deeper than a mere imbalance in chores. My husband had changed. The kind, attentive man I married seemed to be disappearing, replaced by someone who was indifferent and, at times, cold. This shift was painful to witness and even harder to bear. As I stood by the door, trash bag in hand, I realized that resolving this was going to require more than just patience and understanding. Why did he change so suddenly? I didn't want to believe the suspicions that were starting to form in my mind, so I desperately tried to shake them off. But as months passed, Kevin's behavior grew increasingly distant and irresponsible, and our situation escalated beyond mere lack of attention. "Kevin, did you use our money again without asking?" I confronted him one evening after noticing a substantial withdrawal from our joint account. "I just withdrew my share of the salary. I think we need to save for the future, so spending $2,000 or $4,000 a month is questionable," I argued, trying to keep my voice calm despite the frustration boiling inside me. "You earn a high salary, and we don't even have kids, so we could live without my salary, couldn't we?" he retorted, his eyes glued to his smartphone as he lay sprawled on the sofa. It was becoming painfully clear that his phone was more of a companion to him now than I was. It's not about the money, Kevin. It's about us, about planning our future together. Can you please stop looking at your phone all the time and look at me when you're talking? I pleaded, my voice tinged with desperation. Stop nagging me. Don't talk like my mother, he snapped, without taking his eyes off his screen, then walked past me into the bedroom, leaving me standing in the living room, feeling more alone than ever. His continued financial negligence and the increasing distance between us were disheartening. He came home late every day, and on weekends, he started going out alone, no longer wanting to spend time together. I began to wonder if he was bothered by the fact that I earned a higher salary or frustrated because we were struggling to have children. I reflected on whether I should have been more considerate towards him, instead of taking his earlier, more loving behavior for granted. However, my reflections soon seemed unnecessary when a new revelation shattered any remaining illusions. A few days later, I was at a cafe, invited by a friend who happened to be a nurse at a nearby obstetrics and gynecology clinic. It was a beautiful day, and as we chatted, my gaze wandered outside the window where I witnessed something that stopped my heart. There was Kevin, walking into the clinic hand in hand with a young woman who looked to be in her early 20s. My hands gripped my coffee cup so tightly I thought it might shatter. This wasn't a mere coincidence. The friend who had invited me knew Kevin by face and name, as I had shown her his picture before. She had seen him entering the clinic with the unknown woman and, unable to disclose any patient information, she cleverly called me to this cafe, suggesting I casually look out the window. I had a hunch about what she meant, so I kept my eyes on the view outside, my mind racing with betrayal and disbelief. The reality of what I was seeing was almost too much to process. My world, already unsteady from the shifts in our marriage, felt like it was crumbling around me. Standing outside the clinic, my heart throbbed painfully against my chest as I awaited the inevitable confrontation. The idea that my husband could be having an affair, possibly with a woman who might be pregnant, was overwhelming. I strained to keep a level head, reminding myself there could be a harmless explanation. Perhaps he was just accompanying a friend or colleague. Despite these rationalizations, the doubt gnawed at me. After what felt like an eternity, my husband and the young woman finally emerged from the clinic. I approached them hastily, my voice steady but firm. Could you please explain why you were at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic? Kevin looked startled to see me, a sharp contrast to his usual indifference. The woman beside him seemed even more uncomfortable, her eyes darting away as if seeking an escape. Why are you here? Kevin asked, his surprise evident. Not here, I said quickly, pointing towards the cafe where I had just been. Let's talk over there. I led the way, feeling a mixture of dread and determination. As we entered the cafe, I noticed their apprehension. They knew this wasn't a casual meetup. Inside the cafe, I ordered the same coffee I had earlier to give myself a moment to gather my thoughts and calm the storm inside. We sat in silence until our coffee arrived, the tension palpable. Kevin and the woman seemed reluctant to speak first, perhaps intimidated by my quiet demeanor. When the coffee was finally placed before us, I took a sip to steady myself before addressing the looming question. What's the relationship between you two? I asked directly, cutting through any potential pretense. I was not interested in their story's beginning or the nuances of their relationship. I needed to know the current reality, the outcome of their actions. Kevin fumbled for words, his usual composure undone by the directness of my inquiry. His reaction was telling. It seemed clear now that the woman beside him was more than just an acquaintance. She was the person who had been occupying his time and attention, the reason behind his late returns and financial negligence. As I looked at them, waiting for Kevin to formulate a response, I felt a strange detachment settling over me. I had come here braced for the worst, and here it was, unfolding before me. The realization that the man I had loved and trusted was possibly entangled in an affair was painful yet clarifying. Whatever his next words were, I knew they would fundamentally change the course of our lives. The clarity of being on the brink of such a revelation was both terrifying and strangely liberating, as if the final pieces of a painful puzzle were about to fall into place. The words cascaded into the heavy air between us, each syllable striking like a cold, hard raindrop. So, you've been to the gynecologist. Are you pregnant by any chance? I pressed, staring pointedly at Kevin, who squirmed uncomfortably in his seat, unable to muster an answer. My frustration mounted as I sipped my coffee, rapidly losing patience with his silence. Just as I was about to demand a full confession, it wasn't Kevin who responded but his mistress, who, until now, had remained a quiet spectator to our strained conversation. You've been caught, no running away now. We have to clear things up, but still, nice to meet you. I'm Katie. Kevin and I are dating. The last test wasn't conclusive, but today they told me I'm 6 weeks pregnant. Her sudden disclosure jolted me, my hand froze midair, coffee cup in grasp. Her eyes held a serious, almost defiant look, as if she were preparing herself to conquer a significant challenge. Apparently, that challenge was me. To her, this might have felt like a necessary confrontation to solidify her place in Kevin's life, but to me, it was a brazen and shocking revelation. Reacting to Katie's openness, Kevin seemed to find some misplaced bravery to finally speak. We're serious about this. I feel really bad for you, but can you grant us a divorce for our sake? His words, so callous and detached, felt surreal. Thanks for being clear, but you know it's going to be tough, right? Divorce, childbirth, starting a new life, there's a lot to deal with, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside me. Katie responded with a naive optimism, I'll be fine as long as I'm with Kevin. It was as if they viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle in their romantic narrative, a final boss to be defeated for their story to reach a satisfying conclusion. As I sat there, listening to their plans and witnessing their embrace as if they had achieved some great victory, a deep sense of injustice filled me. They seemed to think that navigating this betrayal and its consequences would be simple, their actions justified by their feelings alone. I see you're serious. Let's go ahead with the divorce, I said, masking the bitterness in my tone. They hugged, celebrating loudly enough to draw stares from other cafe patrons. Their lack of discretion and consideration was embarrassing. Good timing with the divorce, yeah, now we can go on our trip next week without sneaking around, Kevin added, his voice filled with relief. As they reveled in their newfound freedom, I couldn't help but feel both defeated and infuriated. Not only had they disregarded the sanctity of our marriage, but they also seemed oblivious to the gravity of their actions. While they imagined defeating the final boss for their happy ending, I knew the reality of their situation was far more complex and would likely prove more challenging than they anticipated. Sitting back, I realized that despite the pain, this confrontation had offered clarity. My next steps would need to be calculated with care. It was crucial not only to manage the divorce with dignity, but also to ensure that they understood the seriousness of their actions. My journey from here would be one of healing and, eventually, finding peace beyond the ruins of a marriage betrayed. What trip? I asked, my voice barely hiding the sharp edge of incredulity. It's a perfect time, with the pregnancy and divorce confirmed. We thought we should travel before Katie's belly gets too big. I was going to lie to you tonight that I had a business trip next week, Kevin explained, almost nonchalantly. I felt my hand go limp, nearly dropping my cup. They were so brazen, discussing their deceitful plans openly, assuming that since I had agreed to the divorce, I was somehow removed from deserving basic respect or consideration. We're getting divorced, right? Aren't there things to discuss? Can't you cancel the trip? I asked, hoping they might see reason. That's a bit, really, you're going to make us cancel? Let us have this trip, Katie piped in, her tone somewhere between pleading and defiant. I sighed, the weight of the entire situation pressing down on me. It was the biggest sigh of my life, drawn from a place of deep frustration. Do you understand why we're divorcing? It's because of you too. Let's just decide quickly then. What do we need to decide quickly? Well, it's about dividing assets and your affairs compensation, I guess. The apartment's rented, so one of us has to leave. I'm not staying. I'll move out. How much is the compensation for the affair, Katie? Can you look it up? Kevin asked her directly, making the surreal scene even more bizarre as his mistress took out her phone and began looking up compensation for affairs. I watched them, a detached part of me observing this casual, almost trivial discussion about something that should have been profoundly serious. The internet says it's between $10,000 and $60,000, Katie announced after a moment. That much? Can we settle for $10,000? Kevin looked at me, expecting, perhaps, that I would be amenable. I'm not a legal expert, but that seems too low. We can decide on the compensation after the divorce. First, let's talk about the house and money since it affects our lives after this, right? You're moving out of the house, right? Then Katie and I will live there, he stated matter-of-factly. I'll move out right away then. I'll move my stuff while you two are on your trip. Next is dividing the assets. It's mainly our savings, right? We haven't been married long, so half each sounds fair, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Sounds good. Let's do that, Kevin agreed quickly, almost too easily. I internally smiled, noting how he unwittingly said exactly what I wanted him to without much effort on my part. This is why divorce discussions aren't supposed to be rushed. To formalize our conversation, I borrowed some paper and a pen from the cafe and drafted a simple document. It stated our agreement to divorce, the reason being my husband's affair, and our decision to split our assets. Unaware of the gravity, my husband readily signed my handwritten document. Such a document does have legal weight, so I carefully took it from him without folding it. I'll pack my things and head out first. Take care, I said, my tone composed yet final, as I prepared to close this chapter of my life and step into an uncertain, yet hopeful, future. Thank you for agreeing to the divorce, I had said with a polite smile to Kevin and Katie before leaving the cafe. The whole scene felt surreal, like a bizarre farewell to a life I was quickly leaving behind. The following week, as I temporarily settled into a hotel room, my mind was preoccupied with finding a new place to live. Knowing that Kevin and Katie were away on their trip, I scheduled movers to help clear out our old house the next day. Amidst organizing my schedule in the hotel room, I received a notification for a mail delivery, an envelope. Inside, to my surprise, was a completed divorce form. Their haste was evident, and though it was unsettling to receive this during their trip, it was strategically advantageous for me. I'll take care of the divorce and moving out tomorrow, I thought to myself, picturing their faces when they returned to find everything settled without their input. They would surely be shocked and would likely call immediately. 2 nights later, as I relaxed in my hotel room, the inevitable call came from my now ex-husband. What the hell? Everything's gone from the house. Not everything, I responded calmly, a smirk spreading across my face. I left your clothes and games on the floor. In the background, I could hear Katie's frantic voice, the panic palpable as they likely surveyed the stark emptiness of what was once a home filled with life and belongings. I had taken the liberty of storing my personal items in a storage unit and had sold everything else that didn't explicitly belong to Kevin. Furniture, appliances, and even smaller essentials like shower heads and cooking utensils, anything that didn't sell, I disposed of. The house was now as empty as any vacant property awaiting new occupants. Why'd you do this? You better compensate for this, Kevin demanded, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. Why should I? I just followed our agreement. We split the assets half after the divorce. You sent the divorce papers, so it's finalized. I just divided the property fairly, I explained, my tone firm yet composed. What do you mean? The furniture and appliances were shared property. We agreed to split them without specific allocation, so I sold everything and converted it to cash. Isn't your money on the living room floor, under your clothes? I could almost see him scrambling to the living room, the phone likely clutched awkwardly against his ear. A moment later, there was a thud as he likely knelt down, followed by a faint murmur, wait, $600 and some change. That's all from selling everything in the house? Yes, that's right. Remember, we brought some appliances from our individual homes when we started living together, so most items didn't fetch a high price. Some even cost money to dispose of. Most of the smaller items were unsellable and had to be thrown away, I explained calmly. The call was filled with their hurried steps and hushed, urgent discussions as they tried to comprehend the situation. This was the cold reality of divorce and separation, where shared lives had to be untangled, often messily. Despite the harshness of the outcome, I felt a sense of closure and readiness to move forward, leaving behind the remnants of a life that was no longer mine. The circumstances and wanting to finalize things quickly, I was satisfied with the agreement. This resolution, while stark and undoubtedly harsh, was necessary to make him realize the serious consequences of his actions. As I hung up the phone after our call, the reality of what had transpired settled over me. I had stripped the house to its bones, leaving only his personal items scattered around. The sound of his coins dropping as he searched for the small amount of cash I left was symbolic of the shock and sudden scarcity he now faced. How am I supposed to live in a place like this? It's empty, as if no one's ever moved in, he had lamented. That's not my concern. We agreed to split the assets after the divorce. The document you signed says so. Any complaints? I had replied, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. He fell silent, the weight of his hastily made decision settling in. The conversation around the divorce wasn't even finished yet. There were still details to iron out, particularly the compensation for the divorce, which he had momentarily forgotten amidst his travel and newfound relationship excitement. Save your regrets for after everything is settled. You might have forgotten with the trip and the house, but we haven't settled on the compensation for the divorce, I reminded him. His plea for leniency was almost pitiable. Please make it low. I spent a lot on the wedding and starting our life together. I'm almost broke. I even used my money for the trip, now I've got about $6,000 left. I understood the impulse to impress and the folly of overspending, but my stance was firm. Unfortunately, I'll be asking for $50,000 in compensation for the affair. Our marriage was short, but we're divorcing due to your affair, and she's pregnant. I think it's fair. If you disagree, shall I consult a lawyer? His silence following this statement told me he was beginning to comprehend the severity of his situation. Realizing the sudden debt in his now empty house must have been overwhelming. Without furniture or appliances, he couldn't live properly. However, with no money on hand and being only 26 years old, my ex-husband now faced the challenge of paying a substantial amount in compensation. This situation likely means furnishing his home with new furniture and appliances would be a distant prospect. After explaining to my ex-husband why the house was so clean, I hung up the phone. Although I couldn't see his face directly, this should make him realize the gravity of taking affairs and divorce lightly. Later, he agreed to pay the $50,000 compensation for the affair. I consulted a lawyer who suggested I could have asked for more. However, considering the circumstances and wanting to finalize things quickly, I was satisfied with the agreement. This resolution, while stark and undoubtedly harsh, was necessary to make him realize the serious consequences of his actions. At his young age and with his finances nearly depleted, the $50,000 compensation would indeed be a significant impact. My intention in settling on that amount wasn't about the money itself, but rather about imparting a lesson on the consequences of one's actions. I had hoped that my ex-husband and his mistress, a young couple at the outset of their life together, would have united to build their lives from scratch. However, it seems that reality hit them hard and fast. After I emptied the house, they resorted to using cardboard boxes as tables and cooked on a portable stove, a truly miserable living situation. Reportedly, the mistress left the house within a week of moving in. With the breakup, my ex-husband now faced not only the loneliness of his solitude but also the definite burden of child support payments. Despite his initial intentions to divorce me and marry his mistress, he somehow ended up alone, his financial obligations only increasing. His downfall didn't stop there. He had posted pictures with his mistress on social media during their trip, publicly announcing his divorce from me and his plans to marry her. Naturally, this sparked inquiries at his workplace. When he admitted the breakup, questions about the reasons followed. Although he evaded the details, rumors about the affair, pregnancy, compensation, and child support began to spread. The world has its mysterious ways of leveling the playing field. With a tarnished reputation at work, he couldn't continue in his job and resigned. Now, faced with the need to pay for the affair's compensation, child support, and secure living expenses, he urgently needed to find a new job. Being passionate and straightforward in love is often seen as positive, but considering my ex-husband's actions and current situation, it's a matter for thoughtful reflection. I've learned a lot from this experience. Some people are suited for love, while others aren't. I think neither my ex-husband nor I were suited for it. In today's world, there are various forms of happiness beyond love and marriage. For now, I'm content with focusing on my work, finding daily fulfillment in my career rather than in romantic entanglements. This ordeal has taught me that while love can be enriching, it is not the sole source of fulfillment or happiness. As I move forward, I am more cautious, more aware of the complexity